The Great Irish Famine, a 19th century tale of tragedy that devastated the Irish people, but was it really a famine? The American Dictionary defines a famine as an extreme lack of food in a region causing suffering and death. Let's dig a bit deeper into this story to see if this definition holds true. In the early 1840s, Ireland was a land of breathtaking beauty and devastating contradictions. Its green fields rolled endlessly, nourished by fertile soil and a mild climate. Farms produced abundant grains, cattle and dairy that filled ships bound for British markets. Yet, within these same fields, the Irish peasantry toiled under crushing poverty. Their lives sustained almost entirely by a single fragile crop, the potato. A nation on the brink. The potato was not just a staple for the Irish, it was their lifeline. Generations of colonisation and had stripped the native population of land ownership. Most Irish farmers were tenants, renting small plots from absentee landlords. These plots were barely enough to grow potatoes for subsistence, while the bulk of arable land was reserved for cash crops and livestock intended for export. In 1845, a silent killer arrived, the potato blight, a fungal disease that turned healthy crops into rotten masses, spread rapidly across the country. By 1846, nearly all of Ireland's potato crops had failed. Families who had once survived on 3 meals of potatoes a day found themselves with nothing. Starvation swept through the land like wildfire. Despite the famine, Ireland's fields and farms continued to produce an abundance of food. Cattle, wheat, oats and butter were shipped to England under armed guard, ensuring the landlords received their rents. British policies of laissez-faire economics dictated that the government should not interfere with the free market. As a result, relief efforts were minimal and no measures were taken to redirect food to the starving Irish. There were many missed opportunities. The tragedy of the Great Famine was not merely an agricultural disaster, but a human-made catastrophe. Solutions existed, but they were ignored. Seizing exports. Redirecting Ireland's food exports to feed the local population could have alleviated much of the suffering. However, the British government refused to interfere with the market, prioritising profits over lives. Land reform. Allowing Irish tenants to own and cultivate land would have diversified their diets and reduced dependence on potatoes. But the feudal system persisted, keeping power in the hands of a few. Investing in infrastructure. Building granaries, food depots and transportation networks could have stored and distributed food more effectively. Instead, existing resources were neglected and food rotted while people starved. Effective relief programs. The government's relief measures, such as soup kitchens and workhouses, were inadequate and dehumanising. Large-scale, organised efforts to distribute food and aid could have saved countless lives. The human cost. By 1852, the famine had claimed over 1 million lives. Another million fled Ireland, boarding overcrowded ships bound for America, Canada and beyond. Those who stayed endured a shattered society marked by deep scars of grief and bitterness. Imagine a world where empathy and pragmatism had guided policy. Had the British government and landlords recognised their moral duty to the Irish people, the famine could have been less severe. A suspension of exports, fair land distribution and robust relief efforts might have preserved Ireland's population and fostered a more equitable society. Instead, the famine became a turning point in Irish history, fueling resentment towards British rule and igniting the flames of nationalism. It remains a stark reminder of the consequences of indifference, greed, and the failure to act in the face of human suffering. As Ireland rebuilt in the decades that followed, its people carried the memory of the Great Famine in their hearts, a haunting testament to what might have been, and a call to ensure such a tragedy would never happen again. In June 1997, during the 150th anniversary of the Great Famine, British Prime Minister Tony Blair issued a statement expressing remorse for the British government's failure to adequately address the crisis. In his message, Blair acknowledged that those who governed in London at the time failed their people through standing by while a crop failure turned into a massive human tragedy. This statement was generally well received in Ireland and interpreted by many as an overdue acknowledgement of British responsibility. However, it did not constitute a formal apology. Additionally, documents released in 2021 revealed that the statement was drafted and approved by Blair's aides without his direct input, as he was unreachable at the time. As of now, the British government has not issued an apology for its role during the Irish famine. Now, let's remind ourselves of the definition of a famine: an extreme lack of food in a region causing suffering and death. Do you really think this definition holds true?